Hello, my name is John Peace with Rural Route Review. Here with several people today. Let me start off with my frequent co-host, Heather. You want to introduce yourself to the viewers and stuff?
Hi, my name is Heather Moses, and I am a lifelong Southwest Virginia resident and a political science major.
And also with us is a returning guest, Doug Mullins. You want to introduce yourself, Doug?
Hey, I'm Doug Mullins. I'm the Commissioner of Revenue in Wise County. And like Heather, I'm a political science
Wow, getting them poli sci's on
major.
here.
Yeah, poli science.
And last but not least, Adam, want to introduce yourself and talk about your campaign signs behind you.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. My name's Adam Murphy, Democratic candidate for Virginia's 9th District, running here for Southwest Virginia. I guess with redistricting now, also parts of the Shenandoah Valley. Really excited to be here with you today. We're going to be going over some good topics. I'm mostly here to just kind of sit and learn. I'll ask some questions as we go, and I'm just thanks for inviting me.
Well, I want to thank everybody for showing up and stuff. And Doug and I, we were kidding a little bit about how we've gotten promoted to the old guard and talking about the good old days. Did you ever think we'd be doing that, Doug?
It seems so far off, but yeah, it's here.
And Adam, give you a little bit of history. When we talk about the coal fields, Virginia, of course, the biggest coal producing counties was Wise, Dixon, Buchanan. But the reason why we throw in Lee County, Scott, Russell, Tazewell, now all of them produced a little bit of coal, but there were so many people that would come to Wise County or come to Dixon County, to work in the coal fields. So they were coal counties, but they were more related, just their employment base was so coal related and stuff. And Doug has a story. Doug, I didn't even know this. I knew your dad was in the coal industry, but I didn't know he was self-employed that long in the coal industry. And I'll turn it over to you, and we'll talk about the good old days and the coal business back in those days.
Yeah, I tell people, I'm like many others in the region. I'm a product of coal in so many ways. My dad was ended up being a non-union strip miner, independent operator, as so many people in this area jumped on that bandwagon in the 70s. My grandfather was 40 years underground union all the way. So I've seen both sides, no question. But basically, as my family has always been involved in the coal industry. And when I was growing up, like most other people, as the saying goes, we were poor, but we didn't know it. I was living with uh, with my family in the little town Pound in Trailer Park downtown. I used to kid with some of my colleagues in the Commercial Revenue Association. They would say, some of those Nova, Hampton Roads, Richmond area commissioners, and they would say, "So, growing up, what kind of environment, neighborhood did you have?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I grew up waterfront." And they'd be like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I lived in a single wide trailer near the Pound River." And they, which would they would be like, "Oh my, we got us one of these kind of guys now." But um, my dad was quick story. My dad was operating a dozer in a neighboring county over in eastern Kentucky, in Isom, Kentucky. He calls my mom one evening and says, "Phil," her name being Phyllis, "I think I'm going to take a shot, go into this business on my own and see what we can do." And she says, "Doug, surely you're not going to give up your good paying job." He said, "Good paying job. Hell, I got $20 in my pocket." And like so many others, got into the industry overnight. I mean, literally, coal prices doubled, tripled, and we were able to move out of the trailer park, and certainly there was a situation where I credit their hard work and the industry for helping me to go to college debt free. So it was a incredible transition for us, and so many other people, as I've said, in the area went out on their own and did these little strip mining operations or underground operations, and there was a lot of money in the 1970s in Wise County, and some of the neighboring counties over in Pike, and like you mentioned before, John, Dickinson, and Buchanan, some of these neighboring counties. So it was an amazing thing. My dad stayed in the market for about 6 or 7 years. It seemed like a long time, but it was only about 7 years. Some of the regulations came along, and I've been on both sides of the story. I used to be an educator, and I've taught the idea of the absentee coal companies coming into the area and taking advantage, and then leaving the area in a bad looking situation. But my dad couldn't put back that high wall. like the regulations were requiring. And so he got out of the industry, but made a good lick while he was in there.
Quick question. Where was his coal? What was the end user? Do you remember?
I don't, John. I'm not really sure exactly that part of it. I was just a little fellow about
Well, the
seven,
So
reason
eight
why I
years
brought that
old.
up, I didn't have immediate family in the coal business, but you don't live here without having family in the coal business and stuff. And it seemed like every one of my family members, wherever they worked, it seemed like it was going to power plants. Duke Power, Florida Power, and then of course Kentucky Utility was the biggest buyer from Westmoreland.
Yeah,
And, so much of that coal, and the reason why I bring it up, you know where I'm going with this later on and stuff, because when your dad was operating, how many gas wells was in? And let me clarify that for viewers outside our area. When we say a gas well, we don't mean gasoline, we mean natural gas,
right.
methane gas.
Yeah.
So that's when we say gas wells. So how many gas wells was that he was around when he was operating?
To be honest with you, I'd never heard that there were natural gas wells in the area at that time. I'm not really sure when they started coming around, but when I became commissioner of the revenue, I got very familiar with it. When the coal industry was so hot in the 70s and all the locals were involved in it, they would bring their money and reinvest it back into the towns and the communities and then also you had a situation where, they paid severance, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, just a little bit later. But yeah, all of it was an amazing time to be living in this area, just in terms of I got a list of things that in my little small town of Pound that used to be so vibrant and so economically active and productive, and in the last several years literally they've been in a fight for to keep their charter. So we'll talk about that maybe in a few
Yeah.
minutes.
And let me tell you how important it was when we had local producers of coal, local operators. I'll give you, for example, here in Big Stone Gap in 1972, and I'm going to brag on AK Fraley and Fraley Coal Company. It was a local people just right down the road owned it. 1972, AK donated $50,000 in 1972 to start our peanut football, youth football program in Big Stone Gap. Now, I
right.
want you to think about how much money in 1972 $50,000 was.
It's a lot.
I mean, they bought all of our equipment, bought everything, and we're still living off that initial investment and stuff. Hey, you wanna know outside Westmoreland Coal Company or a corporate coal company that was doing that and stuff?
Interesting.
Sorry.
So coal was doing so hot for so long that you could literally just be a single person and go, I'm gonna start my own coal company and for a time support yourself. Like that
Get
that's
you a
what we
lease.
meant when we were saying he was independent. Like he could kind of just do the operation himself. So how do you get started in that? Would you buy land from somebody and just kind of go, or like was there a process?
Great. Cool. No,
See if we can
He's
get Doug
kind of
back
like
here.
glitching out like it's
I
like
know, and
the
he has the
Matrix
good
on him,
internet at
It's
the
like
courthouse. He has the good internet.
I have the best internet living where I live than I've ever had in my entire life.
Who's your service provider?
Glow Fiber, Glow Fiber.
Okay.
They're they're only I think around the cities right now, but they're really quite nice. I've never had fiber, so I was like, wow, this is cool.
sorry, guys. Well, maybe there I am. So to answer your question, Adam, I mean, literally, these individuals would go do a little research. They knew where they could actually visually see some seams of coal. You go to the landowner, the surface owner, and say, we'd like to enter a little contract with you to extract the coal, get the coal out of the ground, and we'll pay you X amount or whatever. And so it was just that kind of,
Wow.
as we say, good old boy contractual sort of thing. So yeah, and a lot of people made a lot of money at one time. There's no question about it.
Very cool. Very cool.
And really the coal boom here, and Heather knows this too growing up here, it went all the way through to the 80s, mid 80s. And, you know, if you look at the history of the coal business in the 50s, going way back to the 50s, we had a big drop in employment in the coal industry because of mechanization. Okay, so we were losing jobs. One at the coal industry, we were still shipping coal, like a continuous miner. And then, of course, Westmoreland down here in the Big Stone area had a longwall miner. And one of those pieces of equipment would replace 100 men underground.
Okay.
So we were losing employment. during these times because of mechanization, but the coal was still going out and stuff and everything in the 80s. Doug, now when did your dad hang it up with his individual operation?
He went about 71 to, I think the new reclamation laws came about around 78, something like that. And
Okay.
so he kind of stepped out of it. Some men, and he told me, I was in high school at that time. He said, I'm afraid so and so is going to stay in too long. They're going to be unable to meet the requirements, and it's going to take its financial toll on them. And it did with some. And when we saw a lot of these coal independent operators lose most, if not all, of their money as well over time. Some people did real well. And then some kind of moved on out of the area and hadn't seen them in a little while, but they did a struck a pretty good lick, as they say.
Yeah, Adam, starting probably in the early 80s, we started seeing where the big boys were just taking over, buying up leases, and you saw that big consolidation in the coal industry. So the 80s, it was still booming, but we'd lost those independents. We had a few that kind of hung around and stuff. And then something happened.
Westmoreland.
Yeah, Westmoreland was a good example. And we still had like some regional ones like Fraley's and Humphreys up Norton and they're still operating today, to my knowledge and stuff, to some extent. And
Westmoreland's the one that went bankrupt, moved to Colorado, and then restarted, right? Like that's Westmoreland, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
years ago that was Stone Acre Coke and Coal back in the early 1900s. And then Doug, I'm gonna fast forward a little bit to something that happened in the mid 90s, a little invention called fracking
Yeah.
and horizontal drilling.
Yeah.
And Doug mentioned about, we when I grew up here, I'd never heard about a gas well. But then something in the mid 90s started happening, and Doug can give you some kind of numbers on gas well explosion here in the coal fields.
Yeah, probably even even before that, you had methane wells and everything. But when I came into office here in Wise County as Commissioner of the Revenue, I really had no idea that there were natural gas wells throughout the county. But the contractor who was conducting the countywide general reassessment at that time came into the office. I hadn't been in here. He was finalizing a reassessment, and he walked in the office and he says, "Young man, you want to pick up gas wells?" And I said, "Probably. I don't really know what you mean." And he said, "Well, they've never been assessed in Wise County. Do you want to assess them?" And I said, "Absolutely, I do." I said, "How many are there?" He said, "There's about 750 or so." And I said, "Yeah, pick every one of them up." And so from that point in 2003 to the present, because of, the vertical wells, the methane wells, the horizontal wells, which could run anywhere from $1 million to $3 million in terms of a price tag to get them up and running, we've been picking them up and assessing them. And the gas industry, in my particular experience, hasn't been as readily accepting of severance tax and real estate tax and things of that nature. I've been in court cases with them literally since 2007. And this is a little bit of a rabbit trail sort of thing, but I actually have a case right now in the Virginia Supreme Court. They've they've litigated for quite some time. But what you had is a transition that was happening that people didn't really know about. It was easy to, as a lot of people will do, they'll blame things on certain situations that may not be the case. But power plants nationally were transitioning away from the use of coal to the use of natural gas to operate its plants. And so the demand for coal started dropping because power plants started transitioning away. And so that affected the coal economy here. And I'll tell you just how strongly. When I first came into office, my first 10 years or so, coal severance and gas severance, but 99% of it was coal severance. We averaged being paid in the county anywhere from 1.5 to $2 million per month
Wow.
in
Per
coal
month.
severance.
Wow.
Now, the board, the general fund, got half of that. And there were several other things we don't have time to get into in terms of how the pie was split up. But the local governing body certainly had access to a lot of revenue there. So in any given year, we could be 12 to $15 million of coal severance. Half of that was flowing into the general fund, operating funds and expenses. And so it helped propped up the budget to say the least. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have averaged about $50,000 a month. So for all intents and purposes, we got this past month, I signed the severance report, and I think it was 30 some $1,000 for coal and natural gas. So, the transition away from coal certainly
It's devastating.
it's took its toll on the region.
And Adam, one thing I want to highlight, and this is where we need a congressman for help. Wise County and the Coalfield counties, we're still powering these power plants. We're still doing it, but it's with natural gas. But the problem is with natural gas, we don't get the jobs and we get, Doug, what is the state gas severance tax we do get? I mean, it is low.
Well, yeah, it's 3% of gross receipts. So and coal's 2% of gross receipts. So yeah, and it's self-reporting. There's a lot of issues with the methodologies and so on. But yeah, for the most part here in Wise County, it's become a for coal at least, it's become I wouldn't call it a non-factor, but it certainly doesn't weigh into budget deliberations the way it did. So yeah, and we've seen the effects on our towns and so forth, and yeah, it's kind of tough to see your town that was so vibrant not be that anymore. So we need help. And I will say this: growing up, again in my little town, we had Delegate Orby Cantrell, and he had a number 1 on his license plate. And that basically means he's the top notch. He's the top tenured delegate in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and sets over, is it House Appropriations, I guess. He's the one running the meetings, dishing out the money to whomever. And then we had another guy at the congressional level that I know we're going to talk about maybe in another meeting. His name was Rick Boucher. So we saw growing up just some great leadership. I mean, we're talking about people who understands constituent service and the needs of constituents and very responsive to those needs. I can't wait to share some stories there
So
that
we
I
need to get
saw
back to
firsthand.
though. I mean, that's what the system should be, is a system that responds to the needs of the people that live there. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be, but we just don't seem to have that right now.
Well,
Absolutely.
I want to point out that when a lot of these coal miners, there were huge rounds of layoffs in the 80s. But then a lot of the bigger companies came in and bought up these smaller companies and reopened mines. And so people went back to work. But then around my senior year of high school, 95, 94, 95, I graduated in 96. My very best friend, his daddy worked in the coal mines all his life. His coal mine shut down. He eventually did end up finding another place to go, but a lot of that, plus the injuries, miners get hurt in low coal, especially. It's just hard on the body. So that was about the time of the beginning of the opioid crisis. And that devastated Southwest Virginia. I mean, devastated it. I could go through my yearbook and half of the class members I went to school with are no longer here, either in jail or having passed away from overdose, just or something related to that. But I noticed this week that they're getting farther along with this Sackler sentencing and the settlement. So I'm just wondering, are we going to be able to get some of that money back to Southwest Virginia? Because I understand the whole state of Virginia has been affected by the opioid crisis. None as hard hit as we were.
Heather, when you read the book Dope Sick and stuff, I mean, we were targeted. In fact,
Yeah,
Pennington Gap,
absolutely.
St. Charles, I mean, we were targeted, and for 2 reasons. One, we had a high population that had union minor insurance that paid 100% on meds, and then we had Medicaid. We had unfortunately, we had a high percentage of people on Medicaid in Southwest Virginia, and it pays 100% on meds. So the trick to them to sell opioids was convince the doctors to hand it out. And it's this non-addictive wonder drug for pain. And we were the perfect market for it because they just write a script and it's free.
And I mean, like I said, you've got coal miners are going to have aches and pains, but they don't want, something that's going to screw up their whole life. But then when a doctor says, "Hey, you can take this and you're not going to get addicted to it and it's going to be fantastic." And then everything kind of goes to hell in a handbasket, as my grandma would say. But, I just saw that take such a toll on my age group and even folks older than me and younger than me. And so, hopefully we can get some of that money back into Southwest Virginia and do some good with it. But we've got to figure out something to take the place of coal as far as good paying, good quality jobs with benefits, because you just can't compare the kind of money that coal miners made
Yeah.
to some job you can just go out and apply for off the street. There's no comparison.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Hey,
true.
Adam, I know you've done a lot of research on federal legislation. Is there any pending legislation? I know it's not coming from our current congressman that's trying to get more of those opioid dollars back to rural Southwest Virginia.
I think there is a few that are out there trying to do a little bit. It's never feels like it's enough, does it? I feel like oftentimes when they try to claw back any of these issues or fight for them, it's like the scope is as narrow as possible rather than as broad as possible. I would have to do a little bit of checking to make sure I know if there's anything existing for specifically the opioid. I know there's some stuff out there for black lung, but it sounds like, we just had a black lung forum and there was a lot of things there that I'm glad Kane had a 2.5 hour meeting. But he was learning some things for the first time, and I'm sure that the doctors in the room and some of the other people who were experts, they knew this stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we should be doing for the people of the United States, especially for the people here in Southwest Virginia. We owe them in a lot of ways. I know we don't use coal for power anymore, but we use coal for power for 60 plus years or whatever. I mean, an incredibly long period of time, and so we have to make sure we make it right here in Southwest.
Heather, I was going to talk to you a little bit. Doug talked about, the 70s into the early 80s, how we had a lot of local ownership in the coal industry. I'm going to talk about how Southwest Virginia has just transformed your family's business, which is the local gas station. And of course, quick marts. Y'all have the Black Diamond markets and stuff. Doug, we were talking before we started recording. Pound, Virginia, how many gas stations did you say
Yeah, there
you
were
grew up with?
four gas stations in the little town of Pound. It's just yeah, amazing.
And every
Knew-
one of them was locally owned, right?
Yeah, knew all the families that owned them.
And same way, Big Stone Gap for me. There was at least a half a dozen. They were either owned by Riggs family, Heather's family, owned by the Rogers family. I mean, we can go down the list and stuff. And now, gosh, through corporate takeover, when we hit the 80s, we started seeing that consolidation. Of course, Ronald Reagan with his deregulation platform and stuff opened the floodgates. I can remember an era, and Doug can too, when one owner couldn't dominate a local market like with gas. You had to have a different owner or you had to have a different supplier of gas in a market now. And Heather, you can talk a little bit about your family business and stuff. It started out local and you're one of the survivors. But of course, you're facing corporate takeover now.
Mhm. My grandfather and grandmother started a Riggs Oil Company back with another man, I think in 74, but I could be off by a couple years. Anywho, within like the first year, they bought out the other guy, and I have his name written down somewhere, but obviously I can't think of it right now. Anyway, they ended up starting a few gas stations, and they wanted to haul their own fuel from the depot in Knoxville, the terminal, because you can make more money that way. So they did the trucking side of it, and they had the gas station side, and it's grown considerably. There's over 20 different Black Diamond markets now. But had my grandparents tried to start a business like this today, it wouldn't have happened, because a small business owner, one or two people can't come in, working class people, and start this kind of business, because you have to have the money and you have to have the corporation behind you to be able to make it pay off.
Political power, local political power to make
We
it
grew
happen.
up having so many mom and pop shops, whether they were restaurants, diners, gas stations, there's grocery stores, hardware stores, Johnson's Hardware. I can remember going in there with my daddy as a little girl. All those places went out of business because of big corporations, and the spread of the Walmarts and the Sam's Clubs, and you know, your
Yeah.
Lowe's and your Tractor Supplies. And I mean, I'm not picking on them, but I'm just, all those big corporate businesses replaced small town business.
Yeah. If you'll indulge me, I'll go through this list very quickly because it's a good segue, I think. In the 70s again, was a little fellow running around and popping in and out of stores. Listen, in the little town of Pound, this is what we had back in the mom and pop days, as you're talking about it. Of course, a post office, 2 hardware stores, 4 gas stations, 3 grocery stores, 3 clothing stores, a jewelry store, a Montgomery Ward catalog store, a Sears catalog store, a Five and Dime, a Western Auto, drugstore with a diner, of course, barber shop and hair salons, 2 automotive stores, a Nissan car dealership, at least 3 restaurants, 4 bars, a dentist, a doctor, 2 banks, 3 schools, a movie theater, and an ABC store.
Wow.
In the
Wow.
town of Pound.
What's left,
A
Doug?
town that's barely holding on to a string right now, fighting for their literal town charter.
Yes, well said. Yeah, and so that's the stark contrast that we see, and like I said, and so I I don't know exactly, who knows if there's a fix or a repair. Some of these towns obviously are doing well here, and they have found their niche, and they've kind of been out of the box thinking, but and I know that there's no way that any one individual, elected individual, can do anything about it. But I just go back to Adam, to the days of that responsive, constituent, service-minded elected official at the state level, helping take care of us. We got the 23 Orbit Cantrell Highway, man. I mean, you think that would have happened without that responsive government that was hometown stuff? And again, Congressman Boucher and his staff just responding to constituents, no matter what level is going on. Let me tell you this: when I was a senior, fourth year, my last year at Emory and Henry
Yeah.
College at the time, now university, I got a internship at Congressman Boucher's office, and so I got to see hands on how this staff reacted to calls, constituent calls, and man, it was serious. Somebody called in. They obviously had been told, and they knew they were going to respond to those calls. Then follows that concept follows me all the way to the commissioner's office. I get calls like this from Becky Coleman, Louise Lawson, fabulous people, the rest of the staff, that went something like this: Doug, we know it's not our jurisdiction. We know it's a Wise County thing, but we got a call from a constituent, and we're following up on a little water issue that they have over in, wherever, South Mountain Road or whatever. And, keep us posted on that. Hey, listen, man, that goes a long way. When you got a call from the congressman's office,
Mhm.
I'm a commissioner of the revenue, I'm a tax assessor, but I'm going to check in on that water project, and I'm going to get back to those people. And so I think that it starts fundamentally at that level. And I've heard you say things like that, Adam, and I know that's what you're all about, going to be all.
There was actually a lady in Honaker that was asking about the UMWA pension, and since I've fostered a pretty decent relationship with them, I told her, "Hey, I'll call in for you and I'll see what I can find out." So I actually did reach out to her, found out what the 411 was, needed to call them ultimately to square it all away. But it was cool because there were people who are asking for help, and it manifests in a whole bunch of different ways, and you got to be able to help them.
Absolutely.
You
And
know,
let me
Bill,
tell you this one story my grandfather talked about. He said, son, talk about Congressman Boucher. He said, if there was green stuff oozing up in your backyard, you make one or two phone calls. Your first one was probably to Virginia Tech Extension to find out what it was and what was causing it. Your second phone call was to Congressman Boucher's office to get it fixed.
Yeah,
And
that's
it
true.
didn't matter if you were a small business owner, if you had a problem, one of your two phone calls was to Congressman Boucher's office for help. And let me tell you, you can drive all you want to and ask them if you had a problem, list your first 5 phone calls. It ain't to our current congressman.
and you know, a lot of people don't realize that out of all of the, which Doug probably knows this, but out of all of the southern states, Virginia votes in really high numbers. Like we have a lot of voters. We vote in some of the highest numbers of the country. We're in the 70th percentile. I think the highest is Vermont or New Hampshire, and they're up around 77.
Wow, did not know that.
But the level of government most people deal with on a day-to-day basis is their local government. Up from that, you know, you have your county. Well, obviously, your House representative is kind of your next step up from that. And I was so encouraged by the amount of traffic I saw in and out of here on Tuesday, on election day, because I live across from the polling center in Big Stone Gap. And I was really, really surprised because there was nothing else on this ballot but this referendum. And to see that many people actively coming out and voting, you know, there is a good local interest through the citizens. And I think their interest is up largely due to the fact that they feel unheard, because we haven't had a congressman that cared about what the constituents thought or needed.
Yeah. Adam, I know we're hitting about the 35-minute mark, and I told y'all I'd try to keep you short. Got any questions? Hey, we talked about the coal industry, talked about the history of the kind of the retail industry in our small towns with retail, and what questions you got? Let you finish this up.
What was the primary shift in the coal industry? It seems to be, from the cursory research I've done and what talking to people, it seems to be it was primarily driven by the cost of shifting fuel sources. There was nothing that we could have done to prevent that long-term shift, right? For coal. Like coal was always going to be heading out eventually. Maybe not as quickly, could have been slower in a different timeline, but at the rate we were going, something was going to shift. And something that multiple factions in the coal field, specifically the UMWA, they say don't be an enemy of coal, but you don't have to tell us you're bringing coal jobs back. Like we get it, right? Like they understand. I guess the question that I'd have is what would we want to be its replacement? I have some ideas like ecotourism. I think anything that connects Southwest Virginia to the 21st century or like emerging technologies, so space, computer chips, etc., I think is a good investment. But ultimately, we don't want to like hyper industrialize Appalachia, right? Like people don't want that here. They don't want to see the mountains have factories planted down on top of them, right? So how would you address that? How
I'm,
would you go about it?
I'm going to tell you, Jack Kennedy and I had this conversation 10, 15 years ago. Might be too late for this idea. But at one time, we had the most experienced workforce in America that knew how to work on electric vehicles. Everything underground was electric shuttle cars, electric miners. We had the workforce. And what happened was our current leadership said we dropped the ball. These electric car manufacturers, we should have been the best place in the United States
There
to
should
put
have been
electric car manufacturing.
an EV car company
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
and still might be,
Yeah, there
because we
still
still
could be,
got
but
some of
yeah.
that workforce here. We knew more about working with batteries and working with machinery than any place in the country.
Sense.
Yeah. So we had the skill set, but we just didn't have the leadership locally and elected officials to see, hey, there's a replacement out there that would have paid good wages, would have fit our skill set. And also culturally, we got a workforce that likes to work with their hands. They're not too interested in a coding job. And that was big promotion back 15, 20 years, coal mines to coding, or they sure don't want to work in a call center. And there's nothing wrong with those jobs. For certain people,
I
that's
know,
the
but it's
perfect
it's
job.
a
You
pretty
work in that
significant
industry.
shift. It's
But,
a pretty
if you're a coal
significant
miner
shift.
and you're used to working, that's not their gig. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you think about that kind of manufacturer, and there's still other manufacturing out there, battery manufacturing that would fit our skill set. So that's just one example. I don't know if it's too late or not.
I would love to partner with a company like Rivian or something, right? And be like, hey, why don't you set up shop? We will help build an electric motor of yours. You can set up like a satellite facility or something, right? And we'll
Yeah.
send it to you on a train.
I
And
would like
locally, we do build some electric underground machinery here locally. We do. So Joy Manufacturing down the road.
I would like to see, which and I know they don't bring a whole lot of jobs, but because we've had other sources of clean energy discussed lately coming to Wise County, I would like to see we have so many strip jobs that are reclaimed or in the process of being reclaimed that are just clear, open fields, go on and on and on that would be perfect for solar.
I agree. I agree. If we're going to do solar, first place we should look is here in the coal fields on the reclaimed mine land that where we've already blasted the top of a mountain off. Let's start here. Let's use that then to make them electric co-ops and then start competing with companies like AEP in the region. And when you can get a much lower power bill, you're going to go, well, why would I go with AEP when I could go with the local renewable energy? And then it'll become a spiraling ball
And then
when we prove out that that clearly works. There's a lot of cool things we can do like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Adam, somebody has to manufacture those windmills and those
Yep.
solar panels,
Yep.
and we
Why
have
why
the
can't it
skill
be
set.
us? Why
We
can't it
see
be us, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and, we just I'll be honest with you, uh, I don't think we've set big enough goals for big enough projects. And like we were talking about the national gas severance and stuff, we're still fueling America, but we're not getting that return and that investment back into the coal fields in Southwest Virginia and stuff. And that's where we need help. We need leadership like yourself with a backbone that'll stand up and say, no, we're going to stand up to corporate welfare and then get investment back into our localities and our small towns. And entrepreneurship, that's another big thing. I hope all these stories kind of tie in how we've lost that local entrepreneurship, and with that, we lost that wealth, that local wealth.
Well, that's what built it up was people setting out and having the ability to do so comfortably and then actually go achieve a dream of whatever that was, seizing an opportunity. We definitely need to support that more and not just support let the big guy keep winning. It's got to be local business, local people.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, any other comments and stuff? I appreciate everybody being here, and Adam, any other questions or comments? I'll let you kind of sign us off for the evening.
No, I want to say thank you for having me on. Thank you all for joining. I do enjoy doing this. There's going to be more times I'm going to want to probably speak to both of you either on the show or in person because I know both of you IRL too. But I don't know. It's kind of weird thinking about it from a show perspective. But it's really nice to be able to do this and kind of talk about these issues because I feel like um, in Southwest Virginia in particular, I think a lot of people don't really understand what's going on all the time. I think it's hard outside looking in to get that clarity.
Well, and I hope you definitely come back. We got kind of a future show and let the viewers kind of know we want to do another show, and I'll talk a little bit more about agriculture, especially the dairy industry and tobacco industry, what that used to mean to Southwest Virginia. I think Cindy Green's going to be on a later show, talk about the effect of big box stores had on Southwest Virginia, which probably more people know what that affected Main Street, like Pound, the big box stores, the Walmarts and all that. And also the big
Absolutely.
box grocery stores just changed our downtowns drastically, and it wasn't for the better. And
Yeah.
and so many of those got corporate welfare to even set up shop. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future show. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you
Good.
all so much.
Thank
It's
you.
good to see
Okay.
you
I know you.
all.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Appreciate
Appreciate
it.
you.
All
Bye.
right. See ya. Bye.